Have you ever noticed something about human nature? When someone has a terrible experience at a restaurant, they can't wait to tell everyone about it. The food was cold. The service was horrible. I'll never go back there. But when everything goes exactly as expected, they eat their meal, pay their bill, and go home. Psychologists call this the negative bias. Our brains naturally pay more attention to negative experiences than positive ones, which is why bad experiences are remembered and shared more often. Family, organizations treat the project management office exactly the same way. Nobody notices a great PMO until they don't have one. Here's a quick reflection. The best work in an organization is often invisible. Nobody celebrates the risk that never became an issue. Nobody applauds the dependencies that were identified early. Nobody thanks governance because the project stayed on track and within budget. Instead, everyone notices the project that failed. And that's exactly why I believe so many organizations misunderstand the true, and I do mean the true purpose of a PMO. I remember leading this project where I was doing exactly what I've been trained to do. I wasn't inventing anything to make everyone's life harder. I was recommending risk laws, stakeholder artifacts, governance checkpoints, communication plans, project documents, because those were the standards I had been given to help projects succeed. And almost every recommendation became a conversation or a debate. We don't do that. We never needed that. Why are we creating another document? Then came the one that always almost made me laugh. Well, just check with the enterprise PMO. That's the funny part. You see, the enterprise PMO was the very group that created those templates and expectations. I wasn't asking people to follow my own preference. I was trying to implement the organization's own project management standards. What I eventually realized was that I was fighting over document. I was fighting against tribal knowledge. The managers I partnered with had years of experience inside the organization. They knew how projects had always been run from their perspective. They weren't trying to resist project management. They were relying on what worked for them before. Without consistent governance, reinforcing those standards across the project, every recommendation became negotiable. Instead of talking about project risk, well, we debated whether we even needed a RAID law. Instead of discussing stakeholder alignment, well, we debated whether communication plan was necessary. Instead of preparing for the next stage of the project, you guessed it, we spent our energy debating how the project should be managed in the first place. Oh, that's exhausting for any project manager because you're no longer managing the project. You're defending the discipline of project management itself. Then one day, it clicked. I had been looking at the situation the wrong way. At first, I thought what I needed was a PMO to support me. But over time, I realized that wasn't it at all. I wasn't looking for a PMO to protect me. I was looking for governance to protect the project because a mature PMO doesn't exist to give the project manager more authority. It gives the process more authority. The conversations change from why should we do it your way to this is how we deliver projects here. That's a completely different environment. The project manager no longer has to convince people that a RAID law has value. The communication plan isn't optional. Stage gates are personal preferences. Risk management, well, we know it's not negotiable. See, there are simple parts of the organization's project delivery framework. That's the real value of a PMO. It removes debate over fundamentals so the team can focus on what actually matters, delivering the project successfully. Looking back, I don't blame the people I work with. They were operating from a system that had always been known. The lesson for me was much bigger than one project or organization. When governance is inconsistent, project managers spend their time negotiating the fundamentals of project management. When governance is consistent, project managers can spend their time leading project. And that right there is much better use of everyone's energy. Let me break this down for you real quick, family. That experience completely changed how I think about PMOs. Before that, I thought a PMO exists to support the project manager. Today, I see it very differently. A PMO exists to support the organization because when governance is consistent, projects can become more predictable. Teams become more aligned. Leaders make better decisions. And project managers, well, they spend less time debating the fundamentals of project management and more time leading people towards successful outcomes. That realization taught me three principles that I believe every project manager, every PMO leader, and every executive should understand. Principle number one, great PMOs create consistency, not control. Ooh, I like that, family. One of the biggest misconceptions about PMOs is that they are designed to control people. I don't believe that's true. Great PMOs aren't about controlling project manager. They're about creating consistency across the organization. Think about your favorite restaurant. Imagine ordering your favorite meal at your favorite restaurant. Then you travel to another city, order the exact same thing from that same type of restaurant. You expect a similar experience because there are standards behind the scene. You know, recipe, training, quality checks, operating procedures. Those standards don't limit creativity, they create consistency. Organizations are no different. Without standards, every project manager builds status reports differently. Every team communicates differently. Every stakeholder meeting looks different. Every project defines success, well, of course, different. Now imagine you're an executive overseeing 20 projects. What does that look like? Every dashboard looks different. Every report measures different information. Every project manager, well, they escalate risk differently. That's not flexibility. That is clear confusion. A mature PMO creates consistency so leadership can compare projects, identify risk early, and make decisions faster. Here's the lesson I want you to think about, family. Consistency doesn't remove flexibility. It removes unnecessary variability. That's a big difference. Here's two actionable tips I'd love for you to experiment with. Look at the last three projects you worked on. I want you to ask yourself a question. What was different simply because different people were leading them? If the answer is almost everything, your organization probably has a consistency problem. Next one, create a small list of non-negotiables. Maybe it's a raid log. Maybe it's a stakeholder mapping. Maybe it's a weekly status report. Not because documents solve problems, but because consistency creates clarity. Here's my professional advice. As project managers, don't fight to own every decision. Fight to establish a repeatable system because great organizations don't scale through heroic project managers. They scale through repeatable processes that help ordinary people deliver extraordinary results. But consistency by itself isn't enough. There's another benefit of the PMO that often it gets overlooked if we're being honest. I mean, honestly, it's probably one of those that saves organizations the most money. Principle number two, the best PMOs prevent problems you will never see. See, most people judge project management by what happened. Experienced project managers judge project managers by what never happened, a risk identified early, a dependency uncovered before it delayed the schedule, a stakeholder disagreement resolved before it became an escalation, a scope change caught before it doubled the budget. Those moments right there, they rarely make headlines, but they're often where the greatest value is created. The best PMOs, the exceptional PMOs, don't just respond to problems, they reduce the probability that those problems ever occur. Here's a lesson, family, I want you to think about. Success isn't always about solving more problems. Sometimes it's about creating fewer of them in the first place. Here's two actionable tips I'd love for you to experiment with. When you finish your next project, don't just celebrate what went well. Ask your team, what problems did we prevent? You'll be surprised how long that list becomes. Next one, start documenting prevented risk. Executives understand avoided costs just as much as they realize benefits. Help them see the invisible value your team creates. Here's my professional advice, family. One of the most overlooked leadership skills is making invisible work visible. Don't assume executives know what didn't happen. As they say, show them the receipts. And there's one final principle that changed the way I think PMOs operate forever. Has nothing to do with templates, nothing to do with governance, and everything to do with trust. Principle number 3, PMOs build organizational trust. Every successful project is built on one thing: trust. Trust that the schedule reflects reality. Trust that risks are being managed. Trust that issues won't be hidden until it's too late. Trust that status report actually mean something. When people trust the system, decision making accelerates. Micromanagement, well, it decreases. Collaboration, though, it improves confidence growth. That's why I believe the greatest product a PMO creates isn't documentation, but it is true, undeniable trust. Here's the lesson I want you to think about, family. Trust isn't built when the project succeeds. Mm-mm. Trust is built every week the project tells the truth. Every honest status report, every transparent risk discussion, every difficult conversation, every expectation that managed instead of being ignored. Those moments compound over time. Eventually, people stop asking, can this team deliver? And start asking, I'm glad they showed up to deliver. Here's 2 actionable tips I'd love for you to experiment with. Never use a status report to make people feel comfortable. Use it to help people make better decisions. Oh, that's a tough one, family. Next one. If you're leading a PMO, regularly ask stakeholders what information helps you make decisions faster. Build your reporting around that answer. Here's my professional advice. The strongest PMOs don't measure success by the number of templates they create. They measure success by confidence that create throughout the organization, because when people trust the process, they spend less time questioning it and more time delivering results. Here's the clarity, family. A PMO isn't measured by the number of templates it creates or meetings it schedules. It's measured by the confidence, consistency, and trust it helps build across the organization. Here's my final reflection. I'm going to just tell you the truth, family. The best PMOs I've ever experienced aren't the ones that try to control every project. We kind of align there. They're the ones that really do know how to collaborate. They know how to coach. They know when to adapt, and they know when it's time to hold the line. Because here's something I think we often get wrong. A successful PMO shouldn't disappear into the background. You should know where they are. Not because they're creating unnecessary bureaucracy, but because they're helping projects stay aligned. They're facilitating conversations. They're reinforcing governance. They're removing roadblocks. They're helping project managers succeed before problems become crises. They're making sure every project has the greatest opportunity to finish on schedule, within budget, with a controlled scope, and the level of quality of the organization expects. Now, let me give you an analogy. You remember when you were in school and one of your parents unexpectedly showed up? You noticed, well, I know I did. Immediately, you knew something important was happening. That's how I think about a great PMO. Their presence should mean something. Sometimes they have to be the coach. Sometimes they're there to remove obstacles. Sometimes they're there to help leaders make better decisions. And yes, sometimes they're there to say no. Not because they're trying to make your job harder, but because governance only works when the standards actually mean something. If every stage gate is optional, every risk review can be skipped, every process can be ignored, then governance isn't governance anymore. It's just merely, well, a suggestion. The strongest PMOs understand that balance. They're collaborative enough to earn trust, adaptable enough to meet the standards of the business, and disciplined enough to protect the integrity of the project delivery process. Because at the end of the day, family, a PMO was never created to protect the project manager. It was actually created to protect the project. And when the project is protected, the team performs better, the leaderships make better decisions, and stakeholders, well, they gain confidence, and organizations consistently deliver better outcomes. I want you to remember, sets and reps beat talent when talent doesn't do the reps. If you're new to the episode, I go by the name ED. For all you smart and intelligent folks out there, hey, that just simply means Ed. Until next time.